Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where I just want to give some thoughts on the NBA General Manager poll. Again, this is an annual survey that the NBA conducts on a yearly basis. I think John Schumann, if I'm pronouncing that right, was the one who sort of was in charge of it, at least on NBA.com, so want to give him some props. But we are going to be running through just some of the standout results, giving our thoughts along those lines, and we'll start off with the NBA championship predictions. Again, these are all 30 NBA general managers that participate in these surveys. So the Boston Celtics are overwhelming favorites in the eyes of general managers to repeat. 83% of them said that the Celtics will win the championship once again this year. Really not shocking. The Celtics are, from a roster perspective, very much, geared up for another championship run. Kristaps Porzingis dealing with an injury. He's supposed to be back December, January-ish. So it'll be a bit of a difference maker. Definitely if you're another one of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference, have to try and take advantage of those few months stretch where the Celtics aren't at 100%, maybe steal some home court advantage from them. But I do think the Celtics are in great position once again to repeat. I think it's at least interesting noting the fact that last year the Nuggets, for a team that I personally felt like was in a great position to repeat, and they were my pick coming into the season to win the championship once again, they were at 33%, so not quite as high as I would have predicted. Now the Celtics were tied with them also with 33, so part of that played into it as well. But the Oklahoma City Thunder, number 2 on this list with 13% of the votes, and then it was the Dallas Mavericks, the only other team, at 3% of the votes. So pretty interesting stuff there. Celtics, Thunder, Mavericks, top 3 teams coming into the year in the eyes of these general managers. Something of noteworthy at least, but sounds like the East continues to run through Boston, which makes sense, all things considered. But votes for MVPs heading into this season, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander received 40% of the responses to win. Now, Shai has been a finalist the past couple years. He's been All-NBA first team the past couple years. So it makes sense for sure, especially because the Thunder should be in a great position to take another step forward this upcoming season on what was a very good Thunder team last year. But, a lot of well-rounded efforts, I feel like, across the board there. And the Thunder, we still didn't know if they were really for real. I think at this point, if Shai goes off once again and is able to produce for them at a big-time level, he's in play. But Luka probably would have been my vote. And he was not, I want to make it clear, he wasn't my vote for MVP last year. I stand by the fact that the Mavericks didn't win enough, in my opinion, for him to win MVP. I know the counting stats are excellent. I also know that there, especially during the regular season, Luka provided a lot more valiant of an effort in the playoffs at times, but defensive side of the ball just really isn't there for him. That I do think, those top 2 are probably the most likely contenders. Then you have Embiid, Jokic, and Tatum all tied for 3rd at 7%, which, makes sense, I think, all things considered. Jokic, voters fatigue, you would think, has to kick in at some point, but this is a situation, as the Nuggets at least appear from the outside to be getting thinner and thinner in terms of depth, that if Jokic still is able to produce for them, hard to count him out. Worth noting as well that Jaylen Brown also received a vote, which is ultimately why I don't think him or Tatum are in the conversation, because they would sort of steal votes away from each other. But thought it was interesting that somebody out there voted for Jaylen Brown. Which player would NBA GMs start a franchise around today? Victor Wembanyama, overwhelmingly the favorite in this category at 77%, which absolutely makes sense. You do have Shai and Jokic, both with 10% for themselves, tied for second. I would have to imagine it's more so just built off of the idea that Wemby is still such an unknown for the long term, but he should absolutely be number one in this category. Luka also getting some votes at 3% himself at number 4. So now we're going to dive into the specific positions that were voted upon. Luka Doncic, rated as the best point guard in this survey. He got 37% of the votes. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at number 2. Steph Curry at number 3. Seeing Steph on a list of point guards not at number 1 does not sit right with me at first glance. I do also understand it, though. I'm glad, he's at least in the conversation, and that's fair enough, I suppose. But it is a very interesting conversation, the fact that, Curry just isn't at that same level. And it sort of caught me off guard a little bit looking at this. But I do think that they got it right as well with Luka and Shai. Best shooting guard in the league, Anthony Edwards takes that home with 33% of the votes, followed up by Devin Booker. And then Shai was also in this conversation as well with 20%. Biggest takeaway from this one was the fact that Donovan Edwards didn't even receive a vote. Derek White got a vote for best shooting guard over Donovan Mitchell. And listen, I'm a Celtics fan. I love me some Derek White as much as anybody in the world. But, Donovan Mitchell is somebody who put up, it was 80-something combined points in games 6 and 7 in that Orlando Magic series. He needs way more respect than he gets on a national basis. I don't know what it is with him, but, he is, just one of the best shot creators individually in the NBA, and I really do stand by that. He's a bucket. So, thought it was interesting that, again, Derek White, love him to death, but no Donovan Mitchell shouts at all is very surprising to me. Best small forward in the league, it's Jason Tatum. Well-deserved. NBA fans across the board, you got to get it through your head that Jason Tatum, I understand there are problems with inefficiency at times, and I understand that, he is on a very talented team. But when you talk about a player who can do it all for you, that is Jason Tatum. And I understand inefficiency is not a good thing. And if you're prioritizing offense, somebody like Kevin Durant, maybe somebody like LeBron James, I can understand. But if you're talking about picking a player at small forward for the entirety of the 2024-25 season, I really don't know how you can really go with KD and LeBron, considering their ages, considering the inconsistency in their efforts in terms of the defensive side of the ball. I think it's just, a bit of a fact at this point where they pick their spots a little bit more. Jason Tatum has been incredibly durable throughout his entire career. He is the offensive hub for that team. He didn't take a back seat. It's such a common misconception. He was the one with the ball in his hands generating offense for the Celtics throughout their playoff run, guarding 1 through 5. Jason Tatum's the best small forward in the NBA. And, I'm just going to leave it at that. But best power forward in the NBA? Giannis by a very wide margin. Really not a lot of competition at the position. That being said, though, Giannis down from 97% last year to 77% was very surprising to me. Kevin Durant was second with 7%, and then there were a number of other players involved as well that got votes as well. Victor Wembanyama at 4. He's just 100% a center in my eyes, but maybe that's just me. But to see Giannis drop off so much in terms of a consensus-wide best power forward, I thought was crazy because I think that he very easily still is. Dealt with some injuries last year. The Bucks weren't quite living up to expectations, but even still, it's Giannis, and I really don't think it's close whatsoever. Best center, Nikola Jokic, no surprise there either. 87% of the votes. Got 10% for Embiid, 3% for Wembanyama. It's Jokic. No complaints there. Team that made the best offseason moves. The Oklahoma City Thunder at number 1 at 37%. The 76ers followed up behind with 33%. Knicks also got 20% of the votes as well. interesting notes there. The Thunder, two of the most popular moves from these GMs in terms of under the radar. Alex Caruso was voted as the most underrated acquisition as a whole. Isaiah Hartenstein was also tied for third in that category. So again, not like they went out and they got the superstar talent like the 76ers did, but Thunder definitely did well in the eyes of the general managers, and I would agree with that take. 76ers, they did a lot of an overhaul. Paul George was voted the single acquisition expected to make the biggest impact with 60% of the votes there. So makes a lot of sense. I think add to that as well, you add some rookies that can produce for you. We'll see about that. A lot of people overreacting to a not great Jared McCain preseason game. I can't put that much stock into that. 76ers should be very interesting. Rookie of the Year prediction, 50% of the votes went to Reed Sheppard, which is, at least noteworthy. I'm really excited for Reed Sheppard. I think that now it's just a matter of, is he going to have a role big enough really with Houston is my issue. I'm excited to see him do more with the ball in his hand and such, but you also have a Jalen Green and an Alperen Şengün who sort of need to be the offensive hubs themselves. So we'll see what kind of a role Reed Sheppard has. I do think, probably some pretty decent value bets outside of that, because I don't think that, again, Sheppard's going to have the counting stats to far and away be better, and it's where you see, other players maybe with a chance to take on a bigger role with their organization and, be better there. But, running through some of these last ones as well, best defender in the NBA goes to Victor Wembanyama, who got 40% of the votes. Second place was a three-way tie between Rudy Gobert, Bam Adebayo, and Drew Holiday. So pretty interesting, voting there. Obviously very contested towards the end of the season of who should have been the defensive player of the year. Ends up going to Gobert. Wembanyama definitely has defensive player of the years in his future for him, maybe starting this year. So, we'll see about that. There were more specifics of, Drew Holiday. By the way, Drew Holiday tied for second. Definitely caught me off guard as well. He was voted as the best perimeter defender, which definitely, plays into that as well. Giannis was voted as the most versatile defender. He was tied for fifth with Anthony Davis, and shout out Herb Jones. We're big Herb Jones fans here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, so glad to see him get some love there. Last few categories, best coach in the NBA, Eric Spoelstra. Overwhelmingly the favorite here with 69% of the votes. Mark Dagnall and Steve Kerr rounding out the top three there. More specifically, Spoelstra was voted as the best motivator and somewhat the coach that runs the best defensive schemes. So all checks out with the eye test as well, at least from afar here, as somebody who watches these games from a couch. NBA general managers, back that up as well. Spoelstra also second in best at making in-game adjustments behind Tyronn Lue. So shout out Ty Lue as well. But Spoelstra sort of cleaned up in the coaching categories. Most promising young core, overwhelmingly it was the Oklahoma City Thunder. Makes a lot of sense. Team that has been, taking step after step these past few years, and it has been, a very, very impressive young core that now has championship aspirations. The Orlando Magic second with 20%, and the Houston Rockets third at 10%. Spurs are on this list as well with fourth. Pretty much just centered around Victor Wembanyama, I'm sure. Although I do like Devin Vassell. Stephon Castle is a prospect that I'm pretty high on as well. So interesting there. And then shout out the Pistons at 5. I like a lot of the Pistons players. I'm really hoping that they put it together this season. And then, which rule needs to change the most? The number one answer was the apron rules and the restrictive nature of how the salary cap works as things currently stand. And I think that that's very fair. It has been a little bit of a failed experiment to some degree in terms of this second luxury tax apron. Now, we're still pretty early into it, so it's probably not fair to say failed experiment. This is coming from a Celtics fan who is like, how in the world do they have over $250 million in luxury tax thresholds? And I mean, they built their roster well enough that they're able to sustain not having to make dramatic moves. But I do feel for a team like the Thunder where they're going to have to start working on a budget these next couple of years. And you know, they've been an excellent drafting team. That's why I do love going out and getting like a Nikola Topic in the lottery this past year as somebody who can, you know, maybe be a little bit of a higher upside long-term prospect for when they do have to start, you know, parting ways with some of their key rotation players. But I thought it was very interesting that general managers don't seem to like it. I don't think a lot of players seem to like it as well. Has sort of killed the middle class in the NBA to a pretty solid degree. Number of pretty key NBA players right now that should be getting actual minutes rotations and are having to settle for minimum deals or aren't even in the NBA right now. I think it's a bit of a messed up system right now. So I think that it's interesting that a lot of players are struggling with this and the general managers aren't on board. So they're going to need to do something about that. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well, and we will be back tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.